Check, 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 check. Check it a check, 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 check. Anybody? Everybody? What about this? I think that probably did it. I think that should have done it. Are we here? Can you hear me? Can anybody hear me? The Who, Tommy, right? It's a good one. More of a Quadrophenia fan, personally. Oh, there it is. Okay, great. Great. You love to hear it. What about when I make this change? Still? Yeah? Okay, looks like it's still working. That's good. That seems better. All right, let's just check a thing real quick. Working off of a new device, so it might just take a minute. But here we go, here we go, here we go. All right, hello and welcome to Casual Krakoa. I'm Dave Busing, founder and editor-in-chief of comicbookherald.com. You are listening today to the episode where we're going to talk about the 2022 X-Men election results, okay? So the X-Men election is something that happens annually now. The first one was in 2021, and we as a collective unit, voted on Polaris. Polaris was the winner, therefore Polaris is in the X-Men book. Now, fans don't get to vote on literally everyone in the X-Men team, right? The core team is primarily selected by the creators working on the book. So in this instance, we have Jerry Duggan and Pepe Larraz writing the book right now. It's on issue 6. I didn't really talk about this last week, but issue 6 of X-Men was 100% my favorite of the run to date. Okay, I actually quite enjoyed it. But nonetheless, okay, we get to vote on one person, and that's what's happening here in 2022. The candidates have already been announced for the year of who we're going to get to vote on for this X-Men team. So we'll have a list of like 9 candidates, and we get to, as a collective X-Men fandom, pick one, okay? So we're going to talk about who the candidates are today. We're going to talk about, some stories that I recommend reading for all of them. And then, also I'm just going to do my best to influence everyone listening. And again, thanks to those of you listening live, to select the same individual that I select. So I want everyone to vote for my candidate so they win, because of course I want my candidate to win, right? As all of us will. So, all right, let's dig into, who the candidates are and what their deals are. Now, as we talk about this, again, I am live here. So if you are here live with me in the chat, let me know any questions that you might have. I would love to address as many of them as I can get to today. I don't have a heck of a lot of other things to talk about beyond the election today. So, if there are questions or things about, we got X Lives, X Deaths of Wolverine coming up. We got the end of the Hickman era, obviously, with Inferno just having happened. I've been reading the Phalanx Covenant and Generation X, actually, for my Marvelous Year 1994, and kind of just because I had an itch to do so. So if you want to talk about that little stuff, definitely let us know. But yeah, let's talk 2022 X-Men election. And again, thanks for joining live to those of you who are here for Casual Krakoa. And thank you, Gentle, for welcoming us with that that warming message that you do, in fact, hate this. So, all right, let's talk the election. The candidates for the 2022 X-Men election are Armor, Avalanche, Bling, Firestar, Gentle, Gorgon, Micromax, Penance, Siren, and Surge. Okay, those are individual candidates for the 2022 X-Men election. Here's the thing. Here's the thing about these candidates. Generally, the X Office has done a very good job here to select like pretty lesser known characters. Generally, these are like, characters who are pretty on the fringe. Their X-Men fans will know these characters and have some details about them. But like for the most part, if you go out on the street and you're like, tell me what you know about Micromax, you're going to get arrested. It's as simple as that. You're going to sound like a crazy person because nobody knows about Micromax, myself included, right? Micromax, what? What are you doing here? Everyone voting for Micromax, why? Explain to me why. I really want to understand this. But I will say, I think there's one candidate on here who stands out by far, as the only candidate who has enough of a history and has like been in books and led books to the point that they seem like they're going to run away with this campaign, and it's Penance. It's Monet. It is M. Monet St. Croix touts herself as a near-perfect mutant specimen with a wide range of powers and talents. Also, though she once considered it a burden, Monet is now capable of shifting to and from her deadly penance form at will. She currently is the co-CXO of X Corp. Okay, let's unpack that a little bit here. And I'm seeing in the comments here, I legit don't know who half of them are. Totally fair, right? You can be an X-Men fan. You can be an X-Men fan of the Hickman era and feel that way, right? I would say, of the Krakoa era, the characters who have had relevance and have had important moments. We have Armor has had some moments, and shouts to Armor for putting her name on the ballot for a second straight election. The only character here who is running twice, 2 elections in a row, which is funny, but also, it requires persistence, right? But Armor's had a role in the New Mutants run written by Ed Brisson. Remember that. We have Gorgon, certainly a longtime Hickman favorite, had a run, had a role in X-Men, and then, of course, had a very memorable death in Cable number 6 in the Ten of Swords tournament. And then, we had Penance, right? Monet St. Croix has had a big role, but we also had Siren. Siren had a role in X Factor, the Lee Williams written series, continuing the saga of Siren being possessed by the Morrigan, this goddess of death. That's something that carried over from the end of the Peter David X Factor run, carried into Leah Williams' X Factor, and definitely calls into question Siren's psychological health, I think, heading into, a possible X-Men ship, but also her possession, status. And at the end of X Factor, Siren is no longer possessed by the Morrigan, as far as we know, but that's recent. That's some recent stuff. But anyway, the rest of these characters are virtually untouched in the Krakoa era. And that is both interesting and exciting, but it also certainly, I think, gives a lot of these characters a leg up. Now, getting back to the leg up that I was just describing, which is Penance, right? Like Penance has just an absurd leg up on this. Monet debuts in the Phalanx Covenant in 1994 in Uncanny X-Men. I think it's issue 316, which I actually just read early today because, again, I had the itch to read Phalanx Covenant. You ever just sitting at work and you're working dutifully, right, as we all do, and suddenly something gives you the itch to read the Phalanx Covenant from beginning to end, including all the tie-ins? Or is that just me? Because that happened today, and I really wanted to dig into the Phalanx Covenant, which I did. But that's where Monet starts, right? So that's a lengthy character history. The character then goes on to star in Generation Next, which is a fan favorite, beloved series. Scott Lobdell, Chris Pacciallo. If anyone has a pronunciation guide to Chris Pacciallo that they can elucidate in the chat here in the live stream, I will be eternally grateful, because I've said that 6,000 different ways over the course of talking about comics over the last several years, and I'm 99% sure I've never gotten it right. But anyway, Monet has superstar status in this beloved book, and then goes on to the Peter David X Factor and has a key role there in that series that ran from 2005 until forever, right? So and on top of that, and this is the kicker, Monet actually co-led a book in the Krakoa era. Okay, the only character who has done such a thing in this era of X-Men comics. But here's the problem: X-Corp is the worst book of the Krakoa era of comics. Okay, that was the worst comic of the entire bunch. I know I have been critical of Fallen Angels on here, right, which got a lot of attention as one of the Dawn of X wave books, because the rest of the launch of the Dawn of X was so good. I was particularly let down and disappointed in Fallen Angels, just sort of disconnect from the line. I like Fallen Angels more than X-Corp, okay? I by a lot, actually. X-Corp is a bust. It's a bust. And listen, is that literally Monet's fault, right? Is that literally Penance's fault? Of course not. But if we're viewing this in sort of the meta-narrative of characters leading their own titles, I actually don't think Monet having a co-lead role in X-Corp is to her advantage. In fact, for me, that's a resume killer. Okay, this character already got the opportunity to lead a 5-issue miniseries alongside Angel, and it was the worst of the bunch. So are we going to vote for this character who has already had that opportunity to go and join the X-Men? I say thee nay. Now listen, Monet's a really cool character, okay? Penance is pretty awesome, I really like her character. She's cool. But here, like, Monet has gotten at bats and will continue to get at bats. Okay. So I think whereas a lot of these other characters that we're going to talk about, like, there's no assurance that we will see them in any capacity, with the exception maybe of Gorgon, because there's some post Tennis Swords Otherworld fallout, which is the only reason I want to know more about that character. Hey, I'm seeing X Corp is better than Excalibur in the chat here. It's not. It is definitely not. All right. Sell me on the virtues of X Corp, and I will have the conversation. But Excalibur has upside. Okay. It is not even close for me personally. Right. I will be the Excalibur defender in this scenario as needed. But again, that is my only possible argument against Monet, who is the clear lead, right? The clear #1 seed in this election, if you ask me. The only argument I can come up with is co-led worst book of the Krakoa X-Men era, no longer the Hickman X-Men era, which, boy, is that a problem. If you, let's just hypothetically, you run a website, right? Let's just say you run the world's most helpful comic book website, and you do all sorts of really great, helpful reading orders, and you put in your URL the Hickman X-Men reading order, right? That becomes a problem when that creator leaves the franchise, and now you're on era 3, of that, and I don't know what to call it. So I think it's still just going to stay the Hickman X-Men reading order, except it's just going to have to be the third era. It's a Krakoa X-Men era now. But I'm leaving Hickman in the URL, right? I can't be dealing with redirects and things. I'm a busy guy. So anyway, that's the only argument I can think of against Monet. But otherwise, I mean, listen, don't be surprised when Monet wins. Okay, do not be surprised. This is the most well-known character, with the possible exception of the curveball Firestar, and this is the character with absolutely the most reps, right? The most at bats, the most time together in a bunch of titles that people like. Again, predominantly Generation X in the 90s and X Factor written by Peter David. Okay, so all right, let's talk. And two, I'm seeing here, Laura versus Monet tension. You gotta want it. That's a good comment. If Monet wins, most likely, I'm not going to be bummed by that at all. I'm not going to be bothered by that at all. That's going to be a great addition. Now, I will say that's going to be Monet added to what will continue to be presumably a Jerry Duggan written X-Men book, hopefully continuing with Pepe Larraz art, which would be the main selling point of, like, okay, what's this character going to do? Pepe Larraz doing penance stuff? That sounds amazing. Pepe Larraz absolutely just, God among men at this point on the X books. But is Monet is Jerry Duggan gonna find Monet's voice better than some other creators can? That makes me cringe a bit, right? That makes me a little skeptical. So all right. So I think Monet's gonna win. I think she's gonna win by a landslide. But Monet did not get my vote, and that's my reason why. But again, if you want to read some penance stuff, if you're like, I want to know more about this character, Generation X, baby, go to Phalanx Covenant in 1994, into Generation X, and then jump as much Generation X as you're feeling, but then you can jump to X Factor by Peter David. All right, so let's just go in alphabetical order from that point forward. Actually, you know what? No, let's not do that. Instead, I'm just going to go straight to who I voted for and who I want to see win. Okay, let's do that. And let me know here in the chat, right? And if you're following along live, again, I thank you for doing that. I appreciate you joining here and supporting me. That is super appreciated. Let me know in the chat who you're voting for. If you have questions or you just want to support the site or whatever, the super chat is open. If you want to get those things, make sure that they're visible. I will definitely prioritize what I can see there. But okay, so here is my pick for the X-Men vote 2022. This has already been submitted. My mind cannot be made up on this, again, because I will not be voting twice like some kind of renegade. One vote per person. My vote is gentle. Okay, my vote is gentle, and that is final. I didn't know that much about this character, right? I remember Gentle from like 2 series primarily. I remember him originating in New X-Men, written by Craig Kyle and Christopher Yost. I might have that backwards. Christopher Kyle and Craig Yost? One of the two. The writing partner, Yost and Kyle. In New X-Men, that's where the character debuts. We see the character then in the series that I would actually recommend that everybody vote for, which is, or that everybody read if you want to get to know Gentle a little bit, which is X-Men Worlds Apart. It's a 4-issue miniseries. It stars Black Panther and Storm during the time when they were married, right? Or right around there, right? Because that's right around Civil War, and it's actually a Shadow King story. Okay, it's a Shadow King possesses Black Panther in Wakanda story, and Storm and Gentle kind of have to fight through that and figure it out. It's fairly interesting 4-issue series. Okay, but here's why I'm voting for Gentle. And I've also, the character also shows up again in X-Men Red, the Tom Taylor written series, which is one of those the Dark Ages like Shining Lights, right? One of those books that is still recommendable in the Dark Ages of X books. Gentle shows up there, doesn't get a heck of a lot to do. Here's why Gentle's cool as heck. First of all, okay. Gentle is a character who basically can Hulk out, basically can get as strong as needed, except for the longest time it caused him tremendous, tremendous physical pain. Okay, so like he didn't want to do it. He's also, probably because of that, but also just unrelated, like more or less a pacifist. Okay, hence the tagline Gentle, right? Hence the code name Gentle. The other thing with Gentle is because of this pain, he gets vibranium tattoos to absorb some of the energy that causes him this pain. Vibranium tattoos is one of the coolest 2-word phrases in the entire Marvel universe. Like there are a few things cooler than vibranium tattoos. Now, Gentle's father is Russian and his mother is Wakandan, okay? So he is kind of an outcast within Wakandan space. He faces all this hostility and just sort of like never fitting in Wakanda because of his Russian father. This is my main reason that I think Gentle is so interesting for possible X-Men stories, which is Wakandan politics with Krakoa are incredibly interesting, right? Because of the Storm Black Panther dynamic, because of the fact that Wakanda does not accept or need Krakoan drugs, as they put it, but they have a generally friendly relationship where they acknowledge their nationhood. But then you have Gentle's the other side of his heritage, and I don't know that his father's ever even been seen in a comic, as far as I'm aware. But his Russian father, so you have this Wakandan Russia, of course, is a nation that is actively hostile towards Krakoa, as we've primarily seen in the pages of the Ben Percy written X-Force and everything that's going on there with Colossus, with Mikhail Rasputin, and with the Chronicler and all that stuff, right? So you have a lot of political intrigue with this character's heritage, with their culture, and then again, just like a really interesting, largely untapped character. When this character debuts in the pages of that new X-Men run, they don't get a heck of a lot of at-bats, right? Not a heck of a lot of screen time. And then into like X-Men Worlds Apart, just a supporting character. And then with X-Men Red, you get a little bit about the origin, but mostly you just have Jean Grey stepping in and being like, all right, I get it. I'll fix you. And not really talking to Gentle, not really getting his perspective, kind of just doing the Jean Grey thing and stepping in and taking action and just doing it without the conversation, right? So I think that definitely Gentle is the lead pick for me. I think this would just be a cool character to see. I think visually, Pepe Larraz would kill it. Again, you can have this character just become different sizes, their mass increases, those vibranium tattoos would look cool as hell. That's my vote. All right, so that is who I would like to see voted onto this X-Men team in 2022, and those are my reasons. I want to hear why people agree with that, and I don't want to hear anything else. So you can let me know in the comments. All right. So the other candidates in this lineup, let's talk about all of them. We got Armor. Okay, Armor for me is definitely most well known through Astonishing X-Men. Hisako Ichiki, she can create a powerful psionic force field around herself. We have seen her. She literally plants the first Krakoan flower on Mars way back in House of X #1. And again, in the Ed Brisson Flaviano run on New Mutants, Armor gets a little bit of a role. Again, debuts in the Joss Whedon, John Cassaday Astonishing X-Men book, which is very important for me in terms of my formative years of getting into actual X-Men comics. So Armor's cool. I really like Armor. Again, another character that I will not be bothered seeing voted in. I guess that's kind of the thing is like when I go up and down this list, there's only 2, probably 3 characters that I genuinely don't want to see on the team that I'd actually be like disappointed by. so we can talk. I guess let's talk about those since I'm naming them. All right. So I think the characters that I would be disappointed to actually see voted into the X-Men, Firestar. I think that one's just a stretch, right? Firestar is most well known as one of Spider-Man's amazing friends. From the very funny. If you watch it now, it is on Disney Plus. I tried to get my boys into it, and they were not having it. Spider-Man and his amazing friends cannot hold a candle to Spidey and His Amazing Friends, which is the new modern animated series for children with theme music by Fall Out Boy's Patrick Stump, which rules. It's a very fun show. But anyway, they were not feeling it. But that's where Firestar is most well known. And I think in that vein, a lot of fans don't even realize Firestar is a mutant, okay? Like, this is a thing that gets originated circa 1985, 1986. I would say the most pertinent thing you can read to get a feel for, like, what is Firestar or Angelica Jones even doing here is the 1986 Firestar miniseries. It's 4 issues. That details Angelica's time with the Massachusetts Academy and Emma Frost and their relationship and kind of how all of that falls apart. But, most longtime comics readers even, that stuff kind of falls to the wayside. You have Firestar with the New Warriors for a good long time, the Fabian DCA's run, and then into the 2000s, you have the Kurt Busiek and George Perez Avengers run, where Firestar and Justice from the New Warriors become these sort of new young Avengers on the team. Like, those are the most well-known Firestar comics, I would say. Definitely not super well-known as a mutant. They take care to mention here that Firestar, like, she has not claimed Krakoan citizenship. She does not as readily identify, I think, as mutant as anyone on this list. There's some interesting stories, I think, certainly that can be told with this character. I don't know that they need to take place in X-Men. And also just like the idea of mutant kind uniting behind this character and voting for them for an X-Men team feels like kind of the biggest stretch of the bunch. So I don't really want to see Firestar win out. Even though, again, I would like to see that character in a book in some sort of supporting role to kind of get a feel for, like, what is Angelica Jones' deal? What does she think about all this? That could be interesting. There's meat on the bone there, but I don't want to see Firestar win. The other characters that I definitely don't want to see win would be, I mentioned Penance, but, again, I'd be fine with her winning. Siren, I'm not super into the idea of Siren winning. We already had Banshee, her father, not win last year. I think finished in second to Polaris in the election. Siren, again, same kind of thing. If you want to read more about this character, there's a lot of, like, 90s X-Force and 90s Deadpool. The Peter David X Factor is probably the 2000s book that I most associate with the character. And then, of course, the most recent X Factor with the Morgan stuff. For me, it's the Morgan stuff where I'm kind of like, I just don't feel like Siren's in a place where being on the X-Men makes a lot of sense. I also just, power set, visual-wise, don't think that's that exciting to add to this team. It feels like more of the same in a lot of ways. So I'm not that into the idea of Siren making the team. And then the third pick that I definitely don't want to see elected is Micromax. I've got literally, it's not just that I don't have any love for Micromax, it's that I have nothing for Micromax. It is just a black hole of, technically, I guess I remember this character being in the Alan Davis issues of Excalibur in the 90s, but I have no picks for what you should read for Micromax, and I won't pretend to be bothered. So again, if you're a Micromax stan, let me know. The best thing about Micromax by far is his election photo being a tiny head because he gets big and small, like Giant Man. That is literally the best thing about Micromax, and the only reason I can see this character even making some kind of run is because that's kind of funny. But otherwise, it's those three are out for me. Okay, so back to Armor. I think Armor would be a good fit. I would enjoy it. She makes sense. I'd be surprised if Armor really made a run here. She doesn't seem to have, like, the fan support. Again, she's had these little moments in this era, but I don't know. Like, it doesn't seem like this character has enough of a groundswell of support to truly win. I think the same thing could probably be said for Bling. Bling is a character who I would recommend reading and most recognize from the Generation X run by Christina Strain. This is another really good one. So from the Dark Ages, right? The pre-House of X and Powers of 10 era, where, there weren't many very good X-Men comics. Generation X is very good. Again, written by Christina Strain. Bling's in that comic, and Bling's a cool character. Bling is a cool character, but again, in terms of people knowing a heck of a lot about her or really having a lot of reason to vote for her, I'd be a little surprised if they made a run of any sort. But again, I'm here for it. I'd be into it. I think that would be cool. Okay. Avalanche is maybe the biggest curveball of the whole bunch, I would say. Again, probably, if I'm not mistaken, I guess Siren's probably technically longer running because she actually debuts, I think, back in the Claremont Spider-Woman stuff, as a kind of more of a villainous thing connected with Black Tom. But Avalanche is just like classic Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. I guess not the classic, the renewed classic with Mystique, Destiny, Pyro, and Blob, right? Avalanche is always, he's like the third wheel of the third wheel, on that Brotherhood team. The main reason I like Avalanche is I had a cool action figure of him growing up. Like, that is the primary reason I'm into Avalanche. I liked him as a supporting player with that Brotherhood team. But I do not know Avalanche, like, as a person. Like, even picking comics, I'm like, you can read all the classic Brotherhood stuff. You can read them going into Freedom Force in the 1980s, of course, during the Claremont run. But you don't get a lot of internal anything about who Avalanche is, what his deal is. I remember some stuff, and I don't remember the issues, but during the Utopia era, I think he ran like a bar, which is like the most interesting factoid I can remember about Avalanche. Avalanche does raise the interesting question about all this, which is like, can and should a Brotherhood player, a former evil mutant, be on the X-Men squad? I think that general idea is a good one, and I dig it. I just don't think Avalanche is necessarily the right fit. I see the comment here that I quite dig. Maybe Avalanche is a Mystique Destiny plant. That'd be cool. That'd be really cool, right? If you then get the council influence of Mystique and Destiny in the Destiny of X, with Avalanche on the X-Men squad acting as kind of a mole, but also really wanting to do a good job maybe and connect to that team. That's a cool angle to bring into it. So Avalanche could be interesting. Again, I would not be upset if Avalanche won, but it's definitely a curveball. I think there are probably a lot of more well-known or more established, even somebody like Pyro, who's had such a moment and had such, sort of clear characterizations in Marauders, that would probably make more sense in terms of bringing into the X-Men, just because we've seen something of them, as opposed to bringing in Avalanche, who has had, he has a moment during the last Annihilation event as part of like Sword, but very little beyond that, So, and I'm seeing the comment here too. I think Avalanche would be dope, but like on a Hellions type of book, yeah, I think that's a better fit, right? Bring Avalanche into the equation. Let's get to know him. But I do not think Avalanche is probably the player that we want to see on this X-Men squad. All right. So, and while we're talking about, could villains be elected? Former villains, because no one is a villain on Krakoa anymore, right? That's not how the Mutant Society works. Could former villains be elected into this? That brings in Gorgon, right? Which is probably one of the most interesting to me examples here, right? I would say it's like the ones that really get my attention are obviously Gentle, Monet, and then probably Gorgon. It says here, like the mythical creature of his namesake, Tomi Shishido's gaze can turn anyone who meets it into stone. Obviously, we all remember, if you've been reading this X-Men era, you remember Gorgon from Ten of Swords. He has that incredible death scene where he goes out fighting the White Swords, 100 warriors. He takes out a bunch of them, takes out enough of them that the X-Men sort of have a chance in the tournament. Before that, they were just absolutely getting blown out. So Gorgon is a really interesting mutant, I think. But that interesting, and I really, if you're interested in Gorgon reading, you have like Wolverine, Enemy of the State, where the character debuts, written by Mark Miller, I think with John Romita Jr. And then my pick would be Secret Warriors, right, written by Jonathan Hickman. That's definitely where the character comes into their own. I mean, the problem, the challenge with Gorgon as an electable candidate is, of course, he's Nazi Hydra scum. So, like, that's a big negative. That's a big minus in the category for this character. I mean, the other thing with Gorgon is, Gorgon dies in Otherworld in Ten of Swords and has been resurrected. And we've seen the character since, technically, in Way of X, but they are a shell of them for their former self. He is basically like the mental state of a child, essentially. Nightcrawler has to like do all these pranks to sort of get him from like just childlike childlike rage, like taking his anger out on people. And we don't really have a good sense of like what actually happened to the characters that were resurrected in Otherworld. We have Gorgon and we have Rockslide, and that is the main reason. The main reason I would want to see Gorgon elected would be for like 1 or 2 issues where we could get some answers to what their deal is. And I think too, like what's really interesting. I'm going to spoil Trial of Magneto here. Okay, so if you're worried about that, hop out for like 2 minutes. But what we just saw essentially in Trial of Magneto 1 to 5 is Wanda Maximoff's gift to mutant kind now is that like anyone can be resurrected now, even pre-Cerebro. Okay, she creates this whatever mystical realm where basically any mutant who has existed, a la the example we see is Thunderbird, who dies, way back in Claremont's, first or second issue on Uncanny X-Men number 94. They can be resurrected now, even if Professor X doesn't have a Cerebro backup. Does that change the status for Gorgon and Rockslide, right? Couldn't they just be resurrected now with backups from what Scarlet Witch made available, as opposed to these corrupted Cerebro backups? I guess I don't really know why that wouldn't work, but that's why I'd want to see Gorgon on the team, to have that sort of fully explored and explained. Because if Gorgon starts as he is now, which is, again, just a kind of a broken shell of themselves, I don't know why this character would be elected to the X-Men, why anyone would think that was a reasonable idea, right? It doesn't make a lot of sense. But I think at the same time, if we get Gorgon elected, I want Gorgon elected for 1 or 2 issues, and then I want the election results thrown out after his Nazi past is discovered and he is kicked out of office, and then we get the actual winner back in play. But again, if you want a cool Gorgon read, definitely check out the character in the Hickman written Secret Warriors. I think that is the most interesting example you're going to find. All right, so keep the comments coming. Definitely keep, what is happening here in terms of your votes, in terms of who you want to see. I want to hear it. All right. Let's see. Yeah, we talked about that. We talked about Scarlet Witch maybe making it so Gorgon could be resurrected. That makes sense. Who haven't we talked about so far? I think we covered pretty much everyone. Let's see. We haven't talked about Surge. Surge is definitely the character I've known the least about. That new X-Men run from 2004 to 2008. I think she actually debuts before that, even in the run for like a couple years, probably like 2002 to 2003 in the new X-Men, or I think it's probably maybe it's New Mutants at that point. Regardless, Noriko Ishida, definitely the character I know the least about, have read the least of. She can produce devastating blasts of lightning and move at incredible speeds. She's poised to team up with her fellow new X-Men alums to protect the next generation of mutantdom. Here's what I remember about Surge from those new X-Men issues. This is a character that needs an ally on the creative team, because it's definitely a character who's been written as extremely difficult. I think that's putting it generously. I think I definitely remember some moments where she is outright hostile to the mutants around her, borderline bigoted, I think, a lot of times. So for me, Surge is a tough sell. I'd be curious for fans of the character, and I know this is X-Men, so there are a lot of them, what it is about this character that they think would make a lot of sense as an X-Men, kind of how you would rejuvenate and sort of fix a messy history like that. I would be interested in hearing more about that, because for myself, again, I just don't have a history with the character where I would know a lot about them. I see somebody writing here, I vote Surge. She has better Thanos armor for sure. She's definitely not better than Thanos. She's not cooler than Thanos. Nobody on this list. Nobody. If Thanos was on this list, I would be voting for Thanos. It would not be even close. It would be an absolute massacre, both in terms of the voting results and in terms of what would happen on Krakoa once they let Thanos in. I think there's no doubt about it. That would be a mess. But yeah, no, I just don't know that much about Surge. So my pick, to sum it all up, my pick is Gentle. I think Gentle would be the best candidate to join an X-Men team. I think there's the most interesting possible stories there in terms of Wakandan politics, in terms of potentially Russian politics, in terms of developing this character into something more interesting, and also just like, giving Nesno Abidime something that we know, like giving him a run where we have some knowledge of this character and who they are. I think that would be the best fit. I think Monet Penance is going to win. I don't think it's going to be close. I just think that is such a. If you take Monet off this list, I don't know who's going to win. If you take Monet off this list, then I'm like, I'm actually very confused because Firestar again would be the most well known, alongside maybe Avalanche. Because here's the thing with like with these votings, like this gets broadcast. This isn't just coming out to like X-Men comics readers. You know what I mean, right? This is on Marvel mainstream, right? This is on Marvel mainline. So like the people who are going to win are characters that have been around a long time, or in Polaris's case, somebody who's been on a flippin' TV show, which for in this electorate is only Firestar, So like Monet being on this list, I think in terms of okay, no one here has really had a multimedia presence. So that's out the window. So good on them. But Monet has been in so many more books than everyone else with big roles. I just don't see how Penance doesn't win. That would be honestly really, really weird. So I think what we're going to see, I think the plan here is everybody votes now. So voting extends through tomorrow. Tomorrow is January 13th. At the time that I'm recording this, you can go to marvel.com/X-Men vote and vote for yourself. And then whoever wins, I think will be announced. Well, maybe they'll be announced ahead of time, but they won't debut in X-Men comics until the next Hellfire Gala, which I'm imagining is going to happen again in like June or July, right? It's probably going to be like an annual summer thing with another Hellfire Gala. And this X team wants to do that every year, right? And do a Krakoa Hellfire Gala every year with a new person. So I do have to say, like, big picture, I really like rolling out these X-Men elections every year. This one felt soon, but I was made aware that actually it had been like a year since we did this the first time. It just feels like no time has passed at all because because what is time? But I do like this idea in general, and I think it's a good thing for the X line, and it's a fun thing to kind of talk through, like who your favorite X-Men are on a list of weird small X-Men. I'm definitely not. And I've talked about this before, but like I'm definitely not the kind. Like I'm a big X-Men fan, obviously. I like big stories. I like plots. I like universe dynamics and how everything connects to the Marvel Comics universe. I do not have super strong affiliations with individual characters. I mean, like my favorite mutants I have favorite mutants, right? Certainly, and like Nightcrawler, I really, really love, but I don't have that like intense passion for individual characters that a lot of X-Men fans seem to, with the extension of X-Men fandom on Twitter and certainly here on YouTube in the comments, right? Certain fans just have like fixations and passions for particular characters. And I just do not operate that way. I definitely look at the big picture much more frequently. So for me, when I see a list like this, I don't immediately have super strong emotions, and I also just don't have that much affinity or affection for like all these really, really small X-Men. Again, like I remember the stories they're in, and I remember how I felt about the stories they're in, as opposed to them individually. But again, it's like I do have favorites within that. So I get why some people love it. But for me, it's not exactly how my brain works. I'm seeing a super chat here. It says, I feel like the biggest impact of this era is that it feels like mutants had formed their Wakanda, aka a highly advanced nation with colonies of their own. Yeah, it's definitely a parallel. I mean, there are definitely parallels there in terms of Krakoa being sort of a new Wakanda for mutant kind. I mean, I think it's more than that, frankly, just because of the suddenness of how they emerge and kind of the power that they wield in terms of just literally the individuals that live on the island, But I think, yeah, it's a parallel, and that's why I want to see more of those Wakandan and Krakoan politics come into play, and I think Gentle brings that potential. I mean, that stuff's gonna happen regardless of whether or not Gentle is elected, right? It's set up with the Storm and Black Panther stuff that happened in Ten of Swords in that issue written by Vita Ayala. It's set up back in the Hickman stuff in House and Powers, right? Wakanda's highlighted in red. We do not need Krakoan drugs. There are Wakandan stories that are going to come regardless in terms of how these interact. Could we have a Krakoa versus Wakanda kind of political thing? Could that be an event comic? There's all sorts of things in play potentially with that relationship, and I'm here for it. It was interesting, and I think I talked about this probably in the last one, but in the interview Hickman did with J.M. Miles Explain the X-Men, really good, really interesting interview. He talked about how in his Giant Size comics, he actually wanted when Jean Grey and Emma Frost go on their psychic rescue mission and rescue Storm, he was actually going to have it be where they found Storm, and the secret there was going to be that she was pregnant. And the story, initially at least, was going to be that Storm was pregnant with T'Challa's I think son it was going to turn out to be, that they were pregnant together with a child, and that child was going to play a huge role in terms of like the then but also future stories, because the child was going to be raised in the world, and then it was going to bring in this whole future where you have someone of Krakoa and of Wakanda, which really would have brought these sort of issues and conversations into focus. This gets obviously gets debated heavily, because the idea of like, should Storm and T'Challa have a kid? Would that be a good story? That alone is going to elicit a visceral emotional reaction for a lot of folks. When I just hear that part of it, I'm kind of like, no, that doesn't sound like a story I want. I really prefer Storm as the Queen of Morocco and what's going on now and what's going to be happening in X-Men Red, written by Al Ewing. But the thing with the kid raised in the world, and then future stories being told with this child of Krakoa and Wakanda, that in and of itself sounded pretty cool. That sounded really cool, actually. But those stories are not going to be told. that one did get shut down. I don't think that's a Hickman idea. I mean, the reason he shared it is not because it's an idea that the office is still working on. He shared it because it got shut down. It's not going to happen. So that specific thing is not going to happen. But definitely, we're going to get Wakandan stories of sorts. So, all right, let's hear it. Do we have any other reasons why any other characters should be primary candidates? I would say as well, get in any questions that you have now, and I can address as many as possible here before I go. I'm seeing here in the chat, for folks who are interested in the current state of the election results, as you can see the current results in Marvel's Twitter. Is Penance winning? I haven't looked at any results. Let me know here too. Is Penance just blowing everyone out? Because I have to assume that's what's going to happen here. All right, we got a question here. Any thoughts on Abigail Brand being in league with Vulcan on Arakko? Abigail Brand certainly has wheels within wheels, right? So I think nothing is out of the question with Brand. I'm not sure exactly what the relationship would be with Vulcan, in terms of like, so I think X-Men Red #2, the cover that was teased is it's going to be what's going to be a Storm and Vulcan are fighting on it, right? And covers can be very misleading, but the implication here is that Vulcan's actually going to have a role, which is cool. So bringing the Vulcan stuff back, actually addressing some of those Hickman-y setups, that'll be awesome. Is Abigail Brand going to have a role in all of that? I think she'll have to. I think Sword and Arakko and all that will have to, because the Vulcan secrets are huge, right? The Vulcan secrets are like, hey, there's these weird alien folks, maybe in the Cancerverse, probably in the Cancerverse, who implanted some sort of secret bomb in him or something to that effect. It's just like, is that that's something Abigail Brand's gonna have to deal with, right? In terms of dealing with like, we have a mutant here who is invaded by Cancerverse aliens. This is a problem for the entire galaxy. That's Abigail Brand's deal, right? Is not just protecting Krakoa, not just protecting Earth, but protecting the galaxy, protecting humanity's interest in the universe. So yes, like the Vulcan problem is going to be an Abigail Brand problem. Is that going to mean they're working together in some capacity? I mean, I don't think Abigail Brand, as much as she knows, as much as she has the Nick Fury capacity to know so many things and all of these secrets, Vulcan's secret is like barely known to himself. So I don't think anyone knows that. So I don't know that they could be working together at this stage, although never rule anything out when you see Abigail Brand in the question. We see here Firestar is in the lead, which is not the most shocking. Okay, I think Penance can and should be the favorite amongst X-Men comics readers. Again, Firestar is the only character here with a multimedia presence purely from Spidey and his amazing friends. So if that wins, that's going to be disappointing, because it is just going to be that thing of like, okay, I guess that character has the best brand recognition from like a weird 3-season 80s cartoon. And that's just going to carry the day. That would actually be pretty disappointing. Again, so Firestar was one of my 3 that I actually don't want to see win. I'm seeing top 3, Firestar, Armor, and Penance. Again, Armor and Penance, both those would be cool. Again, Firestar, there are stories to be told. You know what? Like, in a lot of ways, Firestar fits Duggan's X-Men better than anyone. Because Duggan is writing the X-Men right now, kind of like an Avengers squad, right? Like, he is writing Cyclops's and Jean's vision for what this X-Men squad is, as, New York's Avengers heroes, right? The things they are dealing with are the High Evolutionary, with an Annihilation Wave crashing into New York, with, the Mega Robot in the first issue, whatever the heck that was, from Cordyceps Jones and all that. They're going to be dealing with MODOK in an upcoming issue we see on the cover. So, like, he's writing them as the team that fights Avenger-y type battles, that fights Avenger. They fought Nightmare, right? That's a Doctor Strange thing. The only comic, and I think this is why I liked issue 6 so much, the only comic that really felt like mutant-centric and X-Men focused was X-Men number 6, right? The whatever happened to Captain Krakoa stuff, where it's very focused on Krakoa, it's very focused on Cyclops, it's focused on the Quiet Council, and it's focused on Planet Araco and all that, and some new developments as well. So that was a big part of why I thought it was so cool. But Firestar would really fit into that Duggan mode of just being like, yeah, I'm just here to tell big, fun superhero stories. And like, this is a character that has that history. And I should mention for Firestar too, like, there are more interesting things about the character. Like, she's a cancer survivor. This is an individual who has overcome a lot. And again, just that complicated relationship with, like, not identifying with Krakoa and not associating with her mutanthood as much. There's stuff that can be discussed there that could be interesting. So I'm not voting for it myself, and I don't want to see her win, but I understand why she'd be in the lead. And there is, that's the thing, is like, at the end of the day, any of these characters selected, there are interesting stories that could be told, and it's up to Duggan and Larraz and the team to make it happen, So you just got to see whether or not they're going to do it. So, it does seem from the AIPT Adventures in Poor Taste X-Men Monday, where they have all the creators kind of make a case for different electorates. Duggan's comment on Firestar was, she's a cop. So he doesn't seem excited to take on the challenge of Firestar. But maybe that's what he'll write then, right? Maybe that's what he'll write then, and that could work as well. So, one piece of this that I'm not clear on, and I don't know if this was discussed or not, but does the team just add one member, or does someone get taken off? Right? So the X-Men squad, as we have it in the Duggan Larraz run, is whatever it is, 7 deep. Is someone getting taken out of that to add one of the newly elected individuals? Or do we do an election all again and the team has a bunch of turnover and there's this one addition? Or is it just the same team, but now a +1 of Firestar, Penance, whoever, right? I'm not totally clear on the, like, exactly what the team balance is going to be. It seems like there would be a full-on election for everyone on the team every year, right? It's an annual election. It seems like everyone would have to be up for a vote again. So, it seems like then Cyclops, Jean, Laura, Sync, Polaris, like, all these individuals would... Is Rogue in this book? Has she done anything? Why does Rogue never get a moment, right? Let's get some Rogue love. Yeah, anyway, I think they're all going to have to be voted in again. So it'll be interesting to see, like, what the team is going to be. In terms of, like, re-election status and all that, right now I have no idea. We just haven't had enough story to really say. But maybe this article will make that a little bit clearer. Okay, Sunfire. That's right, I forgot about Sunfire. Finally having a cool moment in X-Men number 6. So, I'd like to see that continued and see that individual stay on the team. All right, we had a comment here. Any thoughts on what Deadpool's role will be in Destiny of X, and if his mutant daughter will be brought to Krakoa? So Deadpool is going to be, I think, in the upcoming Ben Percy written Wolverine run. It's a character who was teased in X-Force. We've seen this coming for a little bit. What his role will be, I think it's going to be the role it always is, which is a thorn in Wolverine's side, causing chaos, and also, like, helping some of these X-Men who've lost their way, namely X-Force potentially, see that, like, oh, if Deadpool thinks this is a bad idea, maybe it's a really bad idea. So I think it'll kind of be similar to what we saw. I would actually like, because Deadpool's so good in the Remender Uncanny X-Force from, the early 2010s, I would actually like to see Deadpool back in that arena of more... I don't know if I need Deadpool living on Krakoa. I don't know that it means one difference or another to me. But seeing him actually as a part of, like, a covert X-Factor, or X-Force rather, squad, or at least working with Wolverine a little more closely, as opposed to them just cutting each other up, getting on each other's nerves, and healing a bunch, you know. In terms of a Deadpool's mutant daughter would be brought to Krakoa, I don't remember those details that clearly. That's from the Duggan run, I believe. In terms of like that character, I guess I don't see why not. That would be counter to Krakoa's belief system and laws if she were not. So, all right, let's see, what else do we got here? Seeing some votes for Gwenpool, which there is like a wild Gwenpool event type thing coming up. It's going to be written by Tim Seeley, or at least it was, who I've had like on and off interviews scheduled with for like 4 weeks now. So that could be interesting. I'll have to ask if we ever get that on the books. Let's see, what else here? What are your thoughts on Cassandra Nova joining the Marauders? Positive. I've been heartily rooting for Cassandra Nova to have more of a role in this era of X-Men. I was hoping it would be a little crazier. I was hoping it would be, you know, a bigger part of the extended Hickman X-Men run that was not to be, you know, in terms whether that meant she was influencing Professor X or she was influencing Krakoan politics behind the scene. You know, all that it remains to be seen to certain degrees. But I think, you know, being a part of the upcoming Steve Orlando written Marauders run will be interesting. We don't know what the Orlando Marauders book exactly is going to be, what tone exactly it's going to take. Like, if this was still going to be the Duggan Marauders, I'd be super nervous and pretty opposed, because I think tonally, Cassandra, like, I don't want Cassandra Nova turned into a funny pirate like Pyro. Like, that feels like a miss, and would really sort of kind of ruin the character for me in some ways. So I'm tentatively optimistic. Orlando's a huge Grant Morrison fan. Cassandra Nova, of course, is a Grant Morrison character. We saw this in Orlando's DC stuff, right? Like when he's writing JLA, he's doing all these Morrison ideas and concepts and characters and things. So I think it'll be done with love. I think it'll be done carefully, and I hope it's good. And I do want to know that Cassandra Nova's around and figure out what she's doing and how exactly that's going to play out, because I think that will be very interesting. All right, we got another super chat here. Thanks to everybody who is contributing. Super appreciated. It definitely makes me want to keep doing these, you know, as often as I can. Let's see. We say, after X-Men Monday and Hickman's last interview, it sounds more like he just left to try Substack and left a rough 3-year plan on good terms and will likely be back. Does he still have a Marvel book? Yeah, I mean, you know, I think this is something we've talked about a fair amount, but, you know, I think the answer that is likely the most true of these things, and there's probably certain elements that are like, you know, it's behind closed doors, internal stuff, at a company he still works at, so, like, we're not going to get the full honest truth, I think, in some ways. But the most realistic answer is it's sort of a nuanced separation, you know, where Hickman was like, hey, I want to push things forward. The rest of the office was, but then he asked, because again, like, he's a good general manager here. Like, that's the most interesting thing about the Hickman experiment, that nobody really wanted, you know, in terms of like what we wanted from the comics. But it's basically, he set himself up as like a GM of a team, right? And he was like, can I do this? Can I get you know, he was functioning more editorially than creatively. So he put it to a vote, right? He was like, hey, who wants to do this? And the rest of the staff, the rest of the creatives were like, no, we want to hang out in this Dawn of X. We want to hang out in the Krakoa era. We still have a lot to do here. And he was, you know, the way he tells it, at least, he was like, all right, cool. In that case, I'm out. Maybe for a while, maybe forever. And that's the way he's phrased it. So, like, it's not inconceivable in any way that he could come back for an event down the road. I mean, is that gonna... I don't know. It's a tough thing, right? Like 2 years from now, if we have 2 years of kind of like middling X-Men comics, I don't think that's just gonna feel disappointing, frankly. But if it's like fairly good and Kieran Gillen steps in and Immortal X-Men rules and Al Ewing keeps doing a great job, and it's like, yeah, X-Men comics are still pretty darn good, and Hickman's coming back, right? It's the thing of like, all right, are we bringing a free agent onto a winning team already, or are we bringing a free agent back, you know, to the Bears, right? My beloved Chicago Bears, who are just always terrible. And that'll make all the difference. That'll make all the difference, right? So if everyone else can hold this thing aloft and keep it going and keep some momentum and keep exciting things happening, then the possibility of a Hickman return for any measure is cool and exciting. If it really bottoms out, then it's not going to make a heck of a difference. As far as the question, does he still have a Marvel book? Nothing's been announced. We don't actually know anything about what's next. Obviously, there have been a million theories, but I mean, there's going to be. Hickman still has a contract with Marvel. That has been reported on. That has been made clear. So, I mean, he's still working with Marvel Comics, the publisher. He is still going to be doing something. My favorite, example, right, or my favorite theory is like he's kicking off a Marvel Black Label line of like one and done, out of continuity type projects, in graphic novels. I just think it's such a black hole, pardon the pun, but like it's such a miss on Marvel's part. They don't have something comparable to DC's Black Label. That also seems like the type of book that Hickman is most interested in writing right now. Again, like in an interview he did with Brian K. Vaughan, he literally said he didn't want to do like the long extended run that he's known for anymore. Like he doesn't want to do that. Substack thing, excluded, but that's like a weird, amalgamation of stuff where it's like all this process stuff, and it's not a typical traditional long run. So I like the idea of like whatever Marvel's version of a Black Label project would be. I think that'd be the coolest. I think that would fit the best. A lot of folks are like, oh, he's going to take over Spider-Man. Oh, he's going to relaunch the Marvel Ultimate Universe. Whatever it is, I'll be interested. I'll want to read it. But if it's a Black Label thing or like relaunching the Ultimate Universe where he gets to play player coach again, general manager type thing, I'm probably the most interested. If it's like him taking over a property again, I'm actually less into it. Like, yeah, I'll read it and I'll be curious, but like I don't want to see him just stepping in as like the the property rejuvenator. Like he steps in, he's like, here's a cool IP idea, kicks it off, and then has no intention or conviction of staying. Like that actually sounds more disappointing to me, I think, in a lot of ways. So anyway, we don't have to talk too much more about Hickman because I do all the time. That reminds me, if you like Casual Krakoa and you like Kraken Krakoa and everything I do here on the YouTube channel, I have launched a new series. It's called Hickmania. I am covering all the creator-owned works of Jonathan Hickman. We're going to do one book a month. So it's like a book club, it's a reading club, and then I'm going to have conversations and analysis on here with different guests every month. So the nightly news is already up on the podcast, the Comic Book Herald podcast. If you go to comicbookherald.com, you can find it there. I've got a conversation there with Zach Quaintance, a comics writer. He runs the site Comics Bookcase. It's really good, honestly, and I don't say that lightly. Like we did a good job. We had a good conversation, and we tackled Hickman's The Nightly News, which is a challenging book to talk about 15 years later, actually. And up next is going to be Pax Romana. So we're doing the whole Hickman creator-owned verse like this summer. We're going to be talking Manhattan Projects, East to West. We're going to get into Black Monday murders, right? We're going to get into all the good stuff. So if that sounds interesting to you, if you're a fan of the author and the comics creator, check out Hickmania. That conversation will be going up here on YouTube, on the channel here, hopefully next week. I should have that. So if you're into that idea, come check it out. Check out the Comic Book Herald podcast. Check out the site. And of course, so like and subscribe to the channel, and you'll get the videos here as well. And I do want to, if this goes well, and right now I'm super jazzed about it, and I'm hoping it will, going into 2023, next year, like I want to do the same thing with different creators, So like this year it's Jonathan Hickman. Next year, let me know your thoughts. Like what creators do you think would be cool to do a similar type of project with? There are two, like, so Alan Moore and Grant Morrison are obvious answers, and I think would be extremely fun. But I probably want to keep it somebody a little more modern. I probably want to keep it as somebody a little more recent and a little more actively involved in the contemporary comic scene. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. Question here from Cole Weathers asks, do you think Penance M would care if she loses? Who would be the saddest about not winning? Definitely, Penance does not care. Definitely does not care. It's one of the things I like the most about her. She's a character who is just fully confident in her abilities and capabilities, and does not need the validation of others voting for her. Who would be the saddest? I would be the saddest for Armor, because she's run twice now and not gotten in. Who wants it the most? Probably Bling. I think Bling. Like, there are a number of panels that I've seen shared on social and stuff for people who are, these panels of Bling being like, I want to be an X-Man, because otherwise what is the point of me looking like a mutant and not getting to coexist in society so much, right? And maybe that attitude has shifted a little bit in the Krakoa era, which, would be an interesting thing to explore. But probably Bling. I think Bling would be the saddest about it. But again, I would feel the worst for Armor, because she'd be 0 for 2, whereas everyone else who has not won is 0 for 1. Peter David would not fit the Hickmania criteria that I'm describing here, because he's dated, my man. Peter David is pretty dated. Brian Azzarello, a little closer, little closer to the conversation. I did think about that because I have not read 100 Bullets in full. I started it and I was not getting into it at all, and I know that's a comic that a lot of people love. So that is not uninteresting to me. But yeah, that's more in the conversation. And yeah, like if you've only read Hickman's Marvel work, like this is what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to dig into creators outside of the constraints and the confines of the big two. But like if you're like, oh well, I like Marvel stuff, we're gonna talk about that too, right? There's no good way for me to talk about Pax Romana and not talk about House of X and Powers of 10. There's a lot of overlap. I mean, it's been really cool, I think, too, going back to these creator-owned works of Hickman, where it's like he's writing stuff that gets used in Marvel books later in his creator-owned stuff in 2006, 2007. So those little things are interesting to pick up on. And Pax Romana, again, it's a book that definitely has a lot of shared DNA with House and Powers, as again, kind of all his creator-owned stuff, not all, but a lot of his creator-owned stuff does from that era. So all right, yeah, let me know who you'd like to see explored. In comments here, in the channel in the future. Again, I'm doing a whole year here at Hickmania, so I'm way ahead of myself on this. But yeah, if you're curious about jumping in, check out the video, the first one I'm going to share on the Nightly News. I think it's pretty good. The Nightly News is not my favorite Hickman work, and it's definitely one that I think holds up. It does not hold up as well as some of his others. So if you're kind of like, oh well, it doesn't seem like he's that into it, like don't worry. Like my positivity and my approach to these is definitely going to shift based on the works. Like I'm a huge East to West fan. I'm a huge Black Monday Murders fan. Those are probably the two that I have highest on the best comics of all time list on CBH. And then Manhattan Projects I've loved a lot. And then Pax Romana and Red Mask for Mars I've been getting into as well. Like I hadn't read actually a decent chunk of his creator-owned stuff from the earliest days. Transhuman, Red Mask for Mars. I never touched those. So that's been a lot of fun as well. If that sounds fun to you, come hang out. Come reading along the Hickmania schedule. Again, it's one book per month, so like it's really not that much. All right. Any final X-Men vote or X-Men thoughts here? Otherwise, I'm gonna call it and go get some pizza. All right. Do we have any good thoughts here? Garth Ennis. That would be an interesting one, except kind of faded out. Kind of faded out. I've already read Preachers. I've already read a lot of The Boys. I've already declared The Boys on Amazon is better than The Boys the comic, the rare TV show better than the book. So I don't know that I'd be that into an Ennis dig, but I'd be curious. I could do more of his Hellblazer. That would definitely interest me for sure. What else do we got? Philip Kennedy Johnson. That's an interesting choice. I have not really read anything by Kennedy Johnson that I've been head over heels for, but I haven't read the Superman run at all. So that's a modern choice. That is a new modern choice. I'm thinking someone with a little bigger resume for sure, right? I'm thinking somebody with a bigger resume. Like names that are popping in my head would be like Matt Fraction. I think Remender would be in the conversation, but probably not my pick. But anyway, there's others to go. Somebody just yelled Portillo's in the chat. That sounds amazing. I would love to have Portillo's. I love Portillo's. I bring it here, and I will have some. I would absolutely love Chicago Dog right now. All right. Thanks everybody for listening. This has been awesome. I really appreciate you all joining live here. These are super fun to do. And thanks so much for you joining in the super chat. That is greatly appreciated. If you want to get more X-Men conversation like this, like and subscribe here to the channel. Follow everything at Comic Book Herald, and you can find all my stuff. Rom V, good pick. I like it. I've read a lot of Rom stuff, and he's awesome. But otherwise, thanks for listening. And as always, enjoy the comics.